close your eyes and let me take you on a journey to an island. Not a tropical island of palm trees and white sand, but an island of stone and steel, of millions of voices and endless ambition. Tonight, here on Sleepy City Traveler, we're going to drift together through the streets of New York. Not the frenetic, horn-blaring New York of rush hour traffic and blinding billboards, but the New York that exists in the quiet moments between the chaos. The New York of whispered histories and hidden platforms. The New York that has been dreaming and building and reinventing itself for over 400 years. Imagine yourself standing on the southern tip of Manhattan as dusk settles over the harbor. The air carries the salt of the ocean, mixed with the scent of hot pavement cooling in the evening breeze. In the distance, you can hear the low horn of a ferry crossing the water. The buildings around you are beginning to glow from within, thousands of windows lighting up like stars being reborn. Tonight, we'll explore the island of many hills, the metamorphic rock that holds up a forest of skyscrapers, the grid of streets where sunlight aligns twice a year in perfect symmetry, the underground rivers and forgotten platforms, the library guarded by lions and the bridge tested by elephants. So settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind drift across the water to this island at the edge of America, this place they call New York. Long before there were skyscrapers piercing the clouds, long before the grid of streets and the yellow taxis, long before the name New York was even spoken, this island had another name. The Lenape people, who lived here for thousands of years before European ships appeared on the horizon, called it Mannahatta, the island of many hills. And it was covered in hills. Gentle rises and rocky outcrops, streams that flow down to the rivers, forests so thick that a squirrel could travel from one end of the island to the other without ever touching the ground, leaping from tree to tree through an endless canopy of oak and hickory, chestnut and elm. Try to picture it. No buildings, no streets, just forest and meadow, deer paths and birdsong. The Lenape would paddle their canoes along the shoreline, fishing in waters so clean you could see the bottom, so full of life that oysters grew in massive beds, some of them a foot across. The island was paradise in its way, wild and abundant and alive. That world is gone now, buried under concrete and asphalt, transformed beyond recognition. But the name persists, hidden in the modern name, Manhattan, the island of many hills. Even though most of those hills have been leveled, carved away to create flat streets and building sites, the name remembers what was. For 5 years, from 1785 to 1790, New York was the capital of the United States, the very first capital of this new nation, this experiment in democracy. George Washington was inaugurated as the first president here, standing on the balcony of Federal Hall on Wall Street, his hand on a Bible, taking an oath that no one had taken before because the office itself had just been invented. Imagine that moment. The crowd gathered below, uncertain what this new country would become, uncertain if it would even survive. And Washington, calm and dignified, becoming the first president of the United States in a city that was still more Dutch than English, still finding its identity, still becoming itself. The capital moved to Philadelphia and then to Washington, D.C., but New York remained. And in many ways it became more important than any official capital could be. It became the financial capital, the cultural capital, the capital of ambition and reinvention, the place people came when they wanted to become something they weren't before. The Dutch arrived here in the early 1600s, and they called their settlement New Amsterdam. They built it at the southern tip of Manhattan, where the land was relatively flat, where they could construct a fort and trading post. And according to legend, though historians debate the details, they purchased the island from the Lenape for 60 guilders worth of goods, an amount often translated as about $24. Whether that transaction actually happened, whether it was a purchase or a misunderstanding about land ownership concepts, whether the Lenape thought they were agreeing to share the land rather than sell it, these questions remain. But the story persists. $24 for Manhattan. It's become one of those origin myths that cities tell about themselves, a story too good not to repeat, too perfect in its irony. The Dutch left their mark on the city in subtle ways. The layout of Lower Manhattan, those crooked streets that don't follow the grid. That's the Dutch influence. Streets that followed old cowpaths and the natural contours of the land. Wall Street got its name from an actual wall, a wooden barrier. The Dutch built to protect New Amsterdam from attack, and scattered throughout the city are Dutch place names: Harlem, Brooklyn, the Bronx, all echoes of New Amsterdam, persisting through centuries of change. But here's what really makes New York possible. What allows these impossible towers to reach toward the sky? The rock beneath your feet. Manhattan sits on a foundation of metamorphic rock called Manhattan schist. This rock is ancient, formed deep in the earth under tremendous heat and pressure, thrust up to the surface by tectonic forces over millions of years. Manhattan schist is incredibly strong enough to support the weight of the world's heaviest skyscrapers. That's why the tallest buildings cluster in Midtown and Lower Manhattan. Those are the places where the bedrock rises closest to the surface, where you can anchor the foundations of massive structures directly into solid stone. In other parts of Manhattan, where the bedrock dips deeper underground, the buildings are shorter. Not because people didn't want to build tall, but because the engineering required to reach the bedrock was too expensive, too difficult. The geology dictates the skyline. The ancient rock determines where the modern city can reach upward. If you could see through the concrete and steel, through the basements and subway tunnels, down to the bedrock itself, you'd see this beautiful stone, dark grey, shot through with veins of mica that catch the light, folded and compressed into layers that tell the story of immense geological time. The city literally sits on the bones of the earth, on stone older than any human civilization, older than our species itself. In 1811, the city adopted the Commissioner's Plan, establishing the grid system that would define Manhattan's future. Long, straight avenues running north to south, numbered streets running east to west, crossing the avenues at right angles. It was rational, efficient, perfect for expansion and navigation, but it was also controversial. The grid ignored the natural topography, the hills and valleys and streams. It treated Manhattan like a blank slate, imposing order on landscape, geometry on geology. Hills were carved away, valleys were filled, streams were buried in culverts underground. The island of many hills was flattened into a grid. Yet this grid created something unexpected and beautiful. Twice a year during the spring and fall equinoxes, the setting sun aligns perfectly with the east-west streets of the grid. The light pours down the corridors between buildings, creating a phenomenon people call Manhattanhenge, a reference to Stonehenge, where the sun aligns with ancient stones on the solstices. During Manhattanhenge, the city becomes a solar temple. The setting sun blazes between the buildings, turning the streets into rivers of gold. People gather to photograph it, to witness this moment when the grid and the cosmos align, when the human geometry and the celestial mechanics create something transcendent. Times Square. The name is so famous, so iconic, that it's easy to forget it wasn't always called that. Originally, this was Longacre Square, a relatively unremarkable intersection in a part of the city known for horse stables and carriage makers. But in 1904, the New York Times moved its headquarters to a new building at this intersection, and the square was renamed in the newspaper's honor, Times Square. And from that moment, it began its transformation into what it is today, the crossroads of the world, the place where 1 million LED screens compete for your attention, where tourists gather by the thousands, where the ball drops on New Year's Eve while millions watch. But late at night, after the crowds thin and the theaters close, Times Square becomes different, quieter. The lights are still blazing, but they're illuminating emptiness, reflecting off wet pavement after rain, creating a strange beauty in the absence of people. That's when you can stand in the center of Times Square and actually hear yourself think, when the space reveals itself as more than just a tourist attraction, as a cathedral of light, a monument to commerce and spectacle and the human desire to be dazzled. Out in the harbor, standing on her island, is the Statue of Liberty. She's so familiar now, so photographed and reproduced and iconic that it's easy to take her for granted. But she was a gift, a massive, ambitious, improbable gift from France to America, celebrating the friendship between the two nations and the shared ideals of liberty and democracy. She arrived in pieces, 350 individual pieces packed into 214 wooden crates. Imagine the logistics of that. The pieces were cast in France, disassembled, shipped across the Atlantic, and then reassembled on what was then called Bedloe's Island, now Liberty Island. The crown has 7 spikes, and these aren't decorative. They're symbolic. 7 spikes for the 7 continents and the 7 seas of the world. Liberty isn't just for America. It's a universal ideal, a light meant to illuminate the whole world. And she stands there still, green with the patina of age, her torch raised, her tablet inscribed with the date of American independence. Ships pass her in the harbor. Planes descend toward nearby airports. And she remains patient and eternal, a promise carved in copper, a welcome to the tired, the poor, the huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Beneath the streets you walk on, beneath the subway tunnels and the basements, there's a vast network of infrastructure keeping the city alive. Over 6,000 miles of water mains snake through the underground, bringing fresh water from reservoirs upstate, delivering it to millions of faucets and fire hydrants and fountains. Some of these water mains are ancient, dating back to the 1800s, made of hollowed-out logs, actual tree trunks, bored through and fitted end-to-end, carrying water through wooden pipes. Most have been replaced by now, but occasionally, when workers dig up a street for repairs, they find these old wooden mains, still intact, still functional after more than a century underground. It's humbling, somehow. This reminder that the city is built on layers of previous attempts, previous solutions, previous generations' work. The modern city depends on Victorian engineering, which depended on Dutch foundations, which disturbed Lenape trails. Layer upon layer upon layer, each one supporting what comes next. The New York Public Library on Fifth Avenue is guarded by 2 stone lions. They sit flanking the entrance, massive and patient, gazing out at the street with carved stone eyes. And they have names: Patience and Fortitude. These names were given to them during the Great Depression by Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia. He chose these names because he said those were the qualities New Yorkers would need to survive the economic crisis. Patience and fortitude. The ability to endure, to persist, to wait for better times without losing hope or determination. The lions have become beloved. People touch them for luck. They're decorated with wreaths during the holidays. They've watched over Fifth Avenue through war and peace, boom and bust, countless parades and protests and ordinary days. Patience and fortitude, still sitting, still watching, still embodying the virtues that built this city. Inside the library, there are over 125 miles of shelving. Let me repeat that. 125 miles. If you laid all the shelves end to end, they would stretch from New York to Philadelphia. Much of this shelving is hidden in deep underground stacks beneath Bryant Park, extending down 7 levels below ground. The books descend into the earth like archaeological layers, older volumes deeper down, creating a vertical timeline of human knowledge and imagination. Somewhere in those stacks are first editions of books that changed the world, manuscripts touched by the hands of their authors, maps of territories that no longer exist, the accumulated wisdom and folly of centuries sleeping in climate-controlled darkness, waiting to be called up to the reading rooms above. Grand Central Terminal is more than just a train station. It's a cathedral to movement, to the romance of travel, to the idea that departures and arrivals can be beautiful. And hidden within its famous main concourse is something called the Whispering Gallery. In the passageway outside the Oyster Bar restaurant, the arched tile ceiling creates perfect acoustics. Stand in one corner, face the wall and whisper. Someone standing in the opposite corner, across the entire width of the passageway, will hear you perfectly clearly, as if you were speaking directly into their ear. It's magic, essentially, acoustic magic created by the curves and materials of the architecture. Lovers use it to exchange whispered words. Strangers discover it by accident and delight in the surprise. And the ceiling keeps the secret, channeling voices across space, creating intimacy across distance. The ceiling of Grand Central's main concourse features a beautiful zodiac map painted in gold and aquamarine. The stars are depicted as constellations: Pisces, Aquarius, Orion, surrounded by elaborate decorative elements. It's stunning, but it's also wrong. The zodiac is painted backward, showing the stars as they would appear if you were looking at the celestial sphere from the outside, from above the heavens, from God's perspective, rather than Earth's. Some say this was an intentional choice, a metaphor. Others say it was an error by the artist. The official story is that the design was based on a medieval manuscript that showed the heavens from this divine viewpoint. Regardless of the reason, the backward sky remains, adding a layer of mystery to this grand space where millions of people pass through. Rarely looking up, rarely noticing that the heavens above them are inverted, that they're walking through a station where the stars shine in the wrong positions. Beneath the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, hidden from public view, there's a secret train platform. Track 61. It was built for the exclusive use of VIPs who wanted to arrive in New York discreetly, away from crowds and public scrutiny. President Franklin D. Roosevelt used this platform regularly. His train car would pull into Track 61, and an elevator would lift his car directly up to street level, where it could be driven away without him ever being seen in public. This was important because Roosevelt used a wheelchair, and he worked hard to hide the extent of his disability from the public, fearing it would be seen as weakness. Track 61 still exists, though it's no longer used. The platform sits in darkness, the tracks silent, a ghost station beneath one of the city's grandest hotels. Occasionally it's open for tours or events, and people descend into this hidden piece of history, walking the same platform that Roosevelt's train once served. Central Park looks natural. It feels natural. The rolling hills, the winding paths, the lakes and meadows and forests, they all seem like they grew there organically, like the park is a piece of preserved wilderness in the heart of the city. But it's entirely artificial. Almost every tree was planted, every pond was dug, every hill was sculpted. The architects, Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux, designed Central Park in the 1850s, creating a manufactured nature, a carefully planned wilderness meant to provide respite from the harsh geometry of the city grid. They brought in millions of cubic yards of soil. They blasted rock. They diverted streams. They planted over 270,000 trees and shrubs. They created something that looks ancient and eternal, but is actually younger than many of the buildings surrounding it. And it worked. Central Park has become essential to New York, as vital as the subway or the water mains. It's where the city breathes, where New Yorkers go to remember that there's more to life than concrete and steel, where you can lie on the grass and look up at the sky and forget for a moment that you're on an island of 8 million people. The park is larger than the entire Principality of Monaco. It covers 843 acres, stretching from 59th Street to 110th Street, from 5th Avenue to Central Park West. It's massive. You could spend days exploring it and still find new paths, new hidden corners, new views. And hidden within the park is an Egyptian obelisk called Cleopatra's Needle. It's over 3,000 years old, carved with hieroglyphics during the reign of Thutmose III, erected in the Egyptian city of Heliopolis around 1450 BC. It stood there for centuries, witnessed the rise and fall of pharaohs, survived conquests and empires. Then, in 1881, it was gifted to New York and transported across the Atlantic with tremendous effort. It now stands in the park, surrounded by American elms and joggers and tourists, utterly incongruous, but somehow perfect. A piece of ancient Egypt, much older than New York, much older than America itself, standing silent among the trees, connecting this young city to the deep currents of human history. Deep beneath the streets of Lower Manhattan, 80 feet below ground level, sits the largest gold vault in the world. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York stores gold here, not American gold, but gold belonging to foreign nations and international organizations. Bars of pure gold, each one weighing about 27 pounds, stacked on pallets in compartments carved into the bedrock. The vault is protected by a 90-ton steel cylinder that rotates to open and close. The gold inside is worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and most of it never moves. It just sits there in the darkness, a physical representation of wealth and sacred trust, guarded by the same Manhattan schist that holds up the skyscrapers above. You can tour the vault if you make arrangements in advance. You descend in an elevator, pass through security, and then stand in the presence of all that gold, glowing softly under the vault lights. It's surprisingly beautiful and surprisingly heavy. If you try to lift one of the bars, you realize how dense gold really is, how much weight can fit into such a small volume. The Brooklyn Bridge is iconic now, instantly recognizable, one of New York's defining structures. But when it was built, it was revolutionary. The first suspension bridge to use steel wire instead of iron chains, and at the time of its opening in 1883, it was the longest bridge in the world. The construction was dangerous and difficult. Workers descended into underwater chambers called caissons to excavate the riverbed and build the bridge foundations. Many developed the bends from the pressure changes. The chief engineer, and Washington Roebling, was paralyzed by the bends and spent years directing the construction from his apartment, watching through a telescope while his wife, Emily Warren Roebling, carried his instructions to the workers. When the bridge finally opened, there were concerns about its safety. Would it hold? Would it collapse under the weight of traffic? To prove the bridge was safe, the legendary showman P.T. Barnum led 21 elephants across it in 1884. The elephants marched in a line, their footsteps echoing on the wooden walkway, their weight testing the cables and towers. The bridge held, and New Yorkers believed. Today, you can walk across the Brooklyn Bridge on a dedicated pedestrian path. The view from the middle is spectacular. The skyline of Manhattan on one side, Brooklyn on the other, the East River flowing beneath you. And if you know the history, if you think about the workers who died building it, about Emily Roebling carrying messages, about the elephants proving it was safe, the bridge becomes more than just infrastructure. It becomes a monument to human will and sacrifice, and the determination to connect, to span divides, to build paths across the water. New York's yellow cabs are so iconic that it's hard to imagine them being any other color. But they weren't always yellow. In the early days of taxi service, cabs were all different colors: red, green, blue, whatever the owner preferred. Then a cab company owner named John Hertz commissioned a study to determine which color would be most visible in city traffic, most likely to attract passengers' attention. The study concluded that yellow was the answer. So Hertz painted his entire fleet yellow, and the idea caught on. Other companies followed suit. Eventually, regulations required all taxis to be yellow, and now yellow cabs are inseparable from New York's identity. There's a tiny island in the East River that most New Yorkers don't know exists. Youthant Island, named after a UN Secretary General, is only 100 feet by 200 feet. It's uninhabited, off limits to the public, barely more than a rock with some vegetation growing on it. The island was originally made from landfill during the construction of a tunnel. It was going to be removed, but it ended up staying, becoming a bird sanctuary, a tiny piece of wilderness in the middle of the city's waterways. It sits there quietly, unmarked on most maps, home only to gulls and cormorants, a secret island in plain sight. The Empire State Building has its own zip code, 10118. Think about that. The building is so large, receives so much mail, that it needs its own postal designation. It's essentially a vertical city, with offices and businesses stacked on top of each other. Thousands of people working within its walls every day. At the top of the Empire State Building is a lightning rod, and it's struck by lightning approximately 23 times every year. The building serves as a giant conductor, attracting electrical discharges from passing storms, channeling millions of volts safely into the ground. Watching lightning strike the Empire State Building is spectacular. The bolt connects with the rod at the top, and for an instant, the building glows, electrified, a connection between earth and sky. And every night, the city creates a sound. Not the obvious sounds of traffic and sirens and voices, but a deeper sound, a low-frequency hum composed of subway vibrations and steam pipes, the rumble of millions of people moving through space, the pulse of infrastructure working endlessly beneath the streets. Some people can hear this hum. Others feel it more than hear it, a vibration in the chest, a resonance in the bones. It's the rhythm of the city, the heartbeat of the island, the evidence that New York never truly sleeps, that even in the quietest hours of the night, the city is alive, working, breathing, maintaining itself, preparing for another day of impossible energy and endless ambition. This is the foundation of New York, the island of many hills, flattened and built over but not forgotten. The Dutch settlement that became British, then American, then something beyond nationality, a place that belongs to everyone and no one, that recreates itself constantly while standing on bedrock older than human time. Let the image of Manhattan at night settle in your mind, the grid of lights stretching north from the harbor, the bridges spanning dark water, the Empire State Building glowing against the clouds, the subway rumbling beneath your feet, the stone lions waiting patiently, the hidden platform in darkness, the gold sleeping in its vault, the backward stars shining above Grand Central, the elephants crossing the bridge into memory. This is New York beginning to reveal itself. The first layer peeled back, the foundation exposed. But there is so much more to discover. So many more stories waiting in the steel and glass in the parks and museums, in the neighborhoods that pulse with their own distinct rhythms. Rest here for a moment on this island of metamorphic rock and boundless dreams. Listen to the hum of the city. Feel the vibration of the trains. Breathe the salt air from the harbor. And when you're ready, we'll continue deeper into the heart of this impossible, beautiful, exhausting, exhilarating city. But for now, let New York hold you gently in its bedrock embrace. Let yourself be still on the island of many hills, surrounded by the evidence of human ambition and the weight of geological time. Let the city breathe around you and breathe with it. You are standing on stone that remembers the formation of continents, in a city that forgets nothing and reinvents everything, on an island that has become the world. We turn now from stone and steel to something softer, something green and growing. From the grid of streets to the curves of pathways, from the roar of traffic to the whisper of leaves. This is New York's secret self, the city of parks and ponds, of quiet pockets hidden between the noise, of sanctuaries where time slows and breath deepens, and the urban intensity gives way to something gentler, something necessary for survival in the concrete forest. Let us walk together through these green spaces, these deliberate pauses in the city's relentless rhythm. Let us discover the floating gardens and silent islands, the medieval cloisters and cherry blossoms, the places where New Yorkers go to remember that they're human, that they need beauty and quietness and the company of trees. On Manhattan's west side, 30 feet above the streets, there's a park unlike any other. The High Line was once a freight rail line, built in the 1930s to lift dangerous train traffic off the streets. For decades, trains carried goods through the city on these elevated tracks, passing through buildings, threading between warehouses and factories. When the trains stopped running in 1980, the High Line was abandoned, left to decay. Nature began to reclaim it. Wild grasses pushed through the gravel trackbed. Ailanthus trees sprouted between the rails. Wildflowers bloomed in impossible places. For 20 years, it was a secret garden in the sky, visible only to those who knew it was there, inaccessible to everyone except the occasional urban explorer who found a way up. Then, in the early 2000s, instead of tearing it down, the city transformed it into a public park. They preserved the wild character, the sense of nature reclaiming industrial space, while making it safe and accessible. They planted native grasses and perennials, created winding paths through the greenery, installed benches and viewing areas. Walking the High Line now offers a floating perspective on the city. You're above the street but below the buildings, moving through a horizontal canyon of architecture with wildflowers at your feet. The sound of traffic is muffled by the plants, filtered through leaves and stems. Voices drift up from the streets below, but they're softened, made distant. You're in the city but apart from it, suspended between the urban and the natural. In different seasons, the High Line transforms. Spring brings the flowering of hundreds of plant species. Summer turns it into a green corridor, lush and full. Fall paints it in golds and russets. And winter reveals the structure beneath, the old rail lines, the industrial bones, the honest reality of what this place was and is. Central Park's sheep meadow is now just a vast lawn where people spread blankets for picnics, where sunbathers sprawl in summer, where the grass stretches smooth and green toward the skyline. But once, it was actually home to sheep. A flock of pedigree sheep grazed here from 1864 to 1934, maintained to give the park a pastoral, countryside feel. Can you imagine it? Sheep grazing in Manhattan, the sight of them munching grass while skyscrapers rose in the background, the sound of their bells as they moved across the meadow, the shepherd who watched over them, employed by the city, conducting one of the world's strangest agricultural jobs. The sheep were removed during the Great Depression, when officials worried that hungry New Yorkers might slaughter them for food. They were relocated upstate, and the meadow became what it is today, a great open space, empty of animals but full of people seeking the same thing the sheep once provided, a sense of countryside, of pastoral peace, in the heart of the urban. The Ramble is Central Park's wild heart. 38 acres designed to be deliberately confusing, a labyrinth of winding paths and thick canopy where you can easily get lost. Unlike the rest of the park with its open meadows and clear sightlines, the Ramble is dense, mysterious, slightly dangerous in its complexity. It was designed this way intentionally. Olmsted and Vaux wanted to create a place that felt like deep wilderness, where paths twist and turn unpredictably, where you can't see more than a few feet ahead, where the city disappears completely behind the trees. The Ramble has become one of the best birdwatching spots in North America. Over 230 species have been recorded here. During migration seasons, birdwatchers gather in the early morning, moving quietly through the paths, binoculars raised, whispering to each other about warblers and thrushes, creating a subculture of silence and attention in the midst of the city. There's something profound about standing in the ramble, surrounded by trees, listening to birdsong, and knowing that you're on a small island with 8 million people, that just a few hundred feet away in any direction is Fifth Avenue or Central Park West, that this wilderness is entirely artificial. But the birds don't know that, don't care, find it sufficient for their needs. Central Park contains over 20,000 trees, 20,000 individual living organisms, each one planted and maintained, each one contributing to the ecosystem of the park. Among these are some of the last remaining stands of American elms in the world. Dutch elm disease devastated American elm populations throughout the 20th century. These magnificent trees, once common throughout the eastern United States, were nearly wiped out by the fungal infection. But Central Park's elms have been carefully protected, treated, monitored. They survive here, these remnants of a nearly lost species, growing in the shadows of skyscrapers. Walking beneath these elms, especially the ones along the mall, you're walking through living history. These trees remember a different city, a different America. Their branches arch overhead, creating a natural cathedral, a green tunnel of leaves and dappled light. Summer, their canopy provides shade. In winter, their bare branches create intricate patterns against the sky. Near the western edge of Central Park, there's a place called Strawberry Fields. It's a memorial to John Lennon, who lived in the Dakota apartment building across the street and was murdered there in 1980. The centerpiece is a circular mosaic embedded in the path, with the word Imagine at its center, a reference to Lennon's most famous song. This is designated a quiet zone, a place where noise is discouraged, where people are asked to speak in whispers or not at all. And they do. Tourists and fans gather here, but they're respectful, quiet. They leave flowers on the mosaic, roses, carnations, whatever they've brought. The flowers pile up, creating a temporary garden that's constantly renewed as old blooms fade and new ones appear. Sitting at Strawberry Fields, you can hear the city, the distant traffic, the occasional siren, but it's muted, pushed back. The immediate environment is peaceful. People sit on benches, lost in thought. Guitarists occasionally play Lennon's songs, softly, and the mosaic at the center, with its simple word Imagine, invites contemplation about peace, about loss, about the power of music and the fragility of life. Gramercy Park is the only private park in Manhattan. It sits surrounded by an iron fence, and only residents of the buildings facing the park have keys to the gates. For everyone else, the park is visible but inaccessible, a green space you can look at but never enter. This creates a strange dynamic. The park is beautiful, well-maintained lawns, mature trees, carefully tended flower beds, but it exists primarily for a tiny number of privileged New Yorkers. It's a reminder that even in the city of public parks and democratic spaces, exclusivity persists. Those who have access describe it as incredibly peaceful. Because so few people have keys, the park is never crowded. You can sit there on a spring morning and be completely alone, surrounded by greenery, with the city visible through the fence, but feeling very far away. It's a private sanctuary, a luxury that most New Yorkers can only imagine. In Midtown Manhattan, tucked between office buildings, there's a tiny park called Paley Park. It's barely more than a courtyard, but it features something remarkable. A 20-foot high water wall Water cascades down this wall in a constant sheet, creating a rushing sound that's loud enough to completely drown out the noise of nearby traffic and sirens. Standing in Paley Park is like standing behind a waterfall. The water sound surrounds you, fills your ears, makes conversation possible only if you lean close to the person you're talking to. It's white noise in the most literal sense, a blanket of sound that covers everything else, that creates a bubble of acoustic isolation in the middle of the city. Office workers come here on lunch breaks, sitting with their sandwiches, reading, just being. The water wall gives them privacy, masks their phone conversations, allows them to think without the intrusion of the city's normal soundtrack. It's genius, really. Using sound to create silence, using noise to mask noise, turning the physics of acoustics into a tool for peace. Across the East River in Brooklyn, the Botanic Garden contains a cherry esplanade that rivals anything in Japan for sheer beauty. When the cherry trees bloom in spring, the path beneath them becomes a tunnel of pink blossoms, petals falling like snow, carpeting the ground in soft color. The blooming is brief, usually only a week or two, and it depends on weather, on temperature, on factors beyond human control. But when the conditions are right and the cherries bloom, people come from all over the city to walk slowly beneath them, to photograph them, to simply stand and absorb the beauty. There's a Japanese concept, mono no aware, that roughly translates to a bittersweet awareness of the impermanence of things. The cherry blossoms embody this perfectly. They're beautiful because they're temporary. Their falling is as important as their blooming. And walking beneath them, watching the petals drift down, you're participating in an ancient meditation on beauty and loss, on the passage of time, on the preciousness of the moment. In Upper Manhattan, far from the busy center of the city, sits a building that looks like it belongs in medieval France. The Cloisters is a museum, part of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, but it's unlike any museum you've ever seen. It's made from pieces of 5 medieval French abbeys, dismantled stone by stone, shipped across the Atlantic, and reassembled on this hillside overlooking the Hudson River. Walking through the cloisters is time travel. The architecture is authentic. These stones are actually medieval, actually touched by monks 700 years ago. The gardens are planted with species that would have grown in monastery gardens in the Middle Ages. The art on display is all from the medieval period. Tapestries, illuminated manuscripts, sculptures, altar pieces. But the most remarkable thing is the view. From the courtyard of the cloisters, you can look out over the Hudson River and see no modern buildings. Just the river and, beyond it, the ancient cliffs of the Palisades, looking much as they would have looked 1,000 years ago. The city vanishes. You could be in France in 1250, standing in a monastery courtyard, contemplating eternity. The silence here is profound. The thick stone walls muffle outside noise. Visitors speak in whispers, instinctively respecting the sacred atmosphere. And in the gardens, you can sit among medieval plants and medieval stones and feel time collapse, feel the centuries fold together, feel that human longing for beauty and transcendence that motivated the building of these abbeys has persisted unchanged across the centuries. Roosevelt Island sits in the East River, a narrow strip of land between Manhattan and Queens. You can reach it by subway, but the better way is the aerial tramway, a cable car that glides 250 feet above the river, offering spectacular views of the city and the water below. The tramway ride is surprisingly peaceful. The cabin is enclosed, protecting you from wind. The movement is smooth, steady. As you rise above the city and over the river, the noise fades away. You're suspended in air, floating, watching boats pass beneath you, seeing the skyline from an angle few people experience. On the southern tip of Roosevelt Island sits the Franklin D. Roosevelt Four Freedoms Park. It's a memorial of stark, minimalist beauty, white granite, perfect geometry, absolute symmetry. The design is based on classical principles, creating a space that feels both ancient and utterly modern. Standing at the point of the memorial, surrounded by granite, looking out at the river and the city beyond, you're in one of the most peaceful spots in all of New York. The design channels the wind, creating a specific quality of silence. The stone muffles sound, absorbs it, and the location at the tip of an island in the middle of the river isolates you from the urban intensity. The four freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, freedom from fear, are inscribed in the stone. Roosevelt's words, carved into granite, overlooking the city he governed from the hidden train platform beneath the Waldorf Astoria. The memorial is a meditation on democracy, on rights, on the ideals that animated the New Deal and World War II. But it's also just a beautiful, quiet place to sit and think. Washington Square Park, with its iconic marble arch, is now a gathering place for students and street performers, chess players and musicians. It's lively, energetic, often crowded. But beneath the grass, beneath the paths and the fountain and the life of the current park, lie the remains of an estimated 20,000 people. This land was once a potter's field, a burial ground for the unknown and unclaimed dead. The poor, the unidentified, victims of epidemics and accidents. They were buried here in mass graves, layer upon layer of bodies. When the park was created, most of the remains were left in place. The park was simply built over the graveyard. Occasionally, during construction or repairs, workers unearth bones. Usually they're reburied elsewhere. But sometimes they're just left, undisturbed, because moving all of them would be impossible. So the park continues, the living walking above the dead, the present built literally on top of the past. The Ladies' Pavilion in Central Park is a Victorian cast iron structure, delicate and ornate, sitting on the edge of the lake. It was originally a trolley shelter on Columbus Avenue, but was moved to the park when the trolley lines were removed. Now it serves as a quiet spot to sit and watch rowboats drift across the lake. The pavilion is popular for wedding photos and proposals, for small gatherings and solitary contemplation. From here, you can watch people rowing boats, moving slowly across the water, their oars dipping and rising in a steady rhythm. In the fall, the lake reflects the colored leaves of the surrounding trees. In winter, when the lake freezes, it becomes a still mirror of ice. And in spring and summer, it's alive with ducks and turtles, with lily pads and the play of light on water. Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn is so beautiful that in the mid-1800s, before Central Park existed, it was one of New York's most popular destinations for outings and picnics. People would bring baskets of food and spend the day wandering among the graves and monuments, enjoying the landscaping and the views. The cemetery is built on the highest point in Brooklyn, and from certain spots within it, you can see through the trees to the Statue of Liberty in the harbor. The view is unexpected, you're surrounded by graves and mausoleums, by the markers of the dead, and through the branches you catch glimpses of liberty, torch raised, still welcoming, still promising. Walking through Greenwood is walking through New York history. Many famous New Yorkers are buried here, artists and politicians, businessmen and criminals. The monuments range from simple headstones to elaborate Gothic structures. And everywhere, the landscaping is beautiful. Rolling hills, mature trees, ponds where geese gather. It's a park that happens to contain the dead, or a cemetery that aspired to be a park. Either way, it succeeds at both. In certain subway stations, hidden among the tiles and advertisements, there are small gardens. The most famous is at the 6th Avenue station, where art and plants are integrated into the walls. Ceramic leaves, sculpted flowers, and real growing plants create unexpected beauty in the underground. These subway gardens are easy to miss if you're rushing through. But if you slow down, if you pay attention, you'll see them. Small interventions of nature and art in the utilitarian space of the transit system. They're reminders that beauty can exist anywhere, that even the subway, that most functional of spaces, can hold moments of grace. Bryant Park was built over the site of a former reservoir that once supplied the city with water. Now it's a green oasis in Midtown, directly behind the New York Public Library. In summer, the park offers a reading room, free books, and comfortable chairs where you can sit in the sun and read. The park hosts outdoor movies in summer, an ice skating rink in winter, and year-round it provides a place to sit, to eat lunch, to escape the office for a few minutes. The lawn is meticulously maintained. The chairs are free to move and arrange as you like, and the whole space feels European somehow, civilized and welcoming, a democratic luxury available to anyone who walks through the gates. In the Nolita neighborhood, hidden down a narrow passage, is the Elizabeth Street Garden, a sculpture garden filled with weathered stone statues and overgrown roses. It's technically not a permanent park, existing in a strange legal limbo as the site awaits development. But for now it persists, a secret garden where classical sculptures stand among the plants, creating an atmosphere of romantic decay. The garden is maintained by a non-profit organization fighting to preserve it. Visitors can wander the paths, sit among the statues, and lose themselves in this unlikely green space. It feels European, old world, out of place in Manhattan, but all the more precious for its incongruity. Governor's Island sits in New York Harbor, a short ferry ride from Manhattan. Cars are banned on the island, so the only sounds are bicycles, footsteps, and wind. The island is a retreat, a place to escape the city while staying technically within it. The island has a complex history. It was a military base for 200 years before being open to the public. Now it hosts art installations, concerts, festivals. But even during events, there's space for quiet. You can walk the perimeter, looking out at the harbor, at the Statue of Liberty, at the Manhattan skyline across the water. On a quiet weekday, you might have large sections of the island to yourself. You can lie on the grass on the hills at the southern end, looking up at the sky, hearing only the wind and the distant call of gulls. It's as close to rural peace as you can get while still being in New York City. The Cathedral of St. John the Divine, one of the world's largest Gothic cathedrals, contains something called the Whispering Benches. These are long stone seats placed in the cathedral, and due to their curved shape and acoustics, Two people can sit at opposite ends and whisper to each other, hearing each other perfectly clearly despite being 30 feet apart. It's the same acoustic principle as Grand Central's Whispering Gallery, but in a sacred space, surrounded by soaring architecture and stained glass. Sitting on these benches and whispering creates an intimate connection across distance, a technological magic accomplished with nothing but stone and geometry. In the middle of the East River lies North Brother Island, completely abandoned since the 1960s. It once held a hospital for infectious diseases, where Typhoid Mary was quarantined for years. Then it became a housing facility for veterans, then a treatment center for addicts, and then it was abandoned. Now nature has reclaimed it. Trees grow through the roofs of buildings. Vines cover the walls. Birds nest in the empty windows. The island is off limits to the public, a bird sanctuary, returning to wilderness after its brief century of human use. You can see it from certain points along the shore, this ghost island, slowly dissolving back into green. The New York Chinese Scholars Garden on Staten Island is a place of extraordinary tranquility. Built using traditional Chinese methods and materials, it features a meditation lake, intricate rockwork, and moon gates, circular openings in walls that frame views like living paintings. Walking through this garden, you move from space to space, each one offering a different perspective, a different composition of water and stone and plant. The design encourages slowness, contemplation, attention to detail. Every element is symbolic, every placement intentional, and the result is a space that invites you to breathe deeply, to think clearly, to find stillness. At night in Central Park, the Bow Bridge creates magic on the lake. This cast iron bridge, with its graceful curve, reflects perfectly in the still water below, creating a complete circle of light in the darkness. The bridge itself, plus its reflection, forms this circle, this symbol of wholeness and completion. Photographers love shooting the Bow Bridge at night, especially when the water is calm and the reflection is perfect. The city lights glow in the distance, providing illumination. The lake is dark and mirror smooth, and the bridge hangs suspended between reality and reflection, between the world and its double, creating a moment of perfect symmetry in the midst of the asymmetric city. Let these green sanctuaries settle into your consciousness. The elevated railway transformed into a garden, the sheep grazing in the meadow, the labyrinth of the ramble, the cherry blossoms falling, the medieval monastery overlooking the river, the aerial tramway floating above the water, the graves beneath Washington Square, the water wall drowning out the sirens, the circle of light at the Bow Bridge. New York is not just concrete and steel, not just ambition and noise. It's also these green pockets, these quiet spaces, these deliberate pauses in the urban rhythm. The city understands that its people need beauty, need nature, need places to breathe and think and remember that there's more to life than productivity and movement. Rest here in these parks and gardens, these islands and cemeteries, these hidden courtyards and floating gardens. Let the green grow around you. Let the water murmur. Let the cherry blossoms fall in your imagination. Let yourself find peace in the city that never sleeps, in the quiet pockets that make the noise bearable, in the sanctuaries that make survival possible. We have more to discover in this inexhaustible city, more layers to peel back, more secrets to reveal. But for now, breathe the green air of Central Park. Listen to the silence of the cloisters. Watch the boats on the lake. Feel the mist from the water wall. Rest in the knowledge that even in the most intense urban environment on Earth, space has been made for stillness, for growth, for the essential human need for contact with the natural world. However artificial and maintained that contact might be, we ascend now into the realm of human ambition made vertical. From the green sanctuaries to the soaring towers, from earth to sky, from the quiet of gardens to the silent majesty of art and architecture reaching toward the heavens. This is New York as monument and masterpiece, as museum and miracle of engineering, as a city that builds upward because it cannot build outward, creating beauty in its necessity. Let us climb together through the Art Deco spires and modernist towers, through galleries holding the world's treasures and lobbies of forgotten grandeur. Let us discover the secrets hidden in plain sight, the details that most people rushing past never notice, the quiet moments possible even in these monuments to noise and speed and ceaseless striving. The Chrysler Building stands in Midtown like a silver needle, its spire catching the light, its stainless steel skin gleaming against the sky. When it was completed in 1930, it was briefly the tallest building in the world, a title it held for less than a year before the Empire State Building surpassed it. But what it lacks in ultimate height, it makes up for in pure elegance, in the Art Deco perfection of its crown. The spire is extraordinary. Terraced arches rise in a sunburst pattern, each one faced with gleaming stainless steel. And at the corners of the building, protruding from the facade, are gargoyles shaped like eagle heads, stylized, streamlined, perfect expressions of the Art Deco aesthetic. These eagles seem to watch over the city, guardian spirits of commerce and ambition. But here's the secret of how the Chrysler Building won its brief moment as the world's tallest. Deception. The architect, William Van Allen, knew he was in a race with the Bank of Manhattan Trust Building to claim the title. So he designed the spire in secret, assembling it inside the building itself, hidden from view. Then, when the Bank of Manhattan topped out, thinking it had won, the Chrysler Building hoisted its spire, ear through the roof in just 90 minutes, adding 125 feet to the building's height and claiming the record. It was a magnificent trick, a moment of architectural theatre that captured the competitive spirit of the era. The spire emerged like a magician's reveal, glittering and triumphant, transforming the building from ordinary to extraordinary in less than 2 hours. The Empire State Building was constructed with astonishing speed. 410 days from groundbreaking to completion. That's roughly 4.5 floors per week, an achievement that seems impossible even by modern standards. Workers labored around the clock, coordinating thousands of tasks, assembling the steel skeleton, and then clothing it in limestone and granite. The speed was partly necessity. The building was started in 1930, during the early years of the Great Depression, and the developers needed to get it finished and occupied as quickly as possible. But it was also a point of pride, a demonstration of American can-do spirit, of industrial might and organizational efficiency. From the observatory on the 86th floor, on a clear day, you can see 5 states: New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. The view is breathtaking. The city spreads beneath you in all directions, the rivers gleaming like ribbons, the other skyscrapers reduced to models, the streets turned into a grid of lines barely visible far below. But what's most striking is the silence. Up here, you're above the noise of the city. The traffic sounds don't reach this high. The sirens and horns and voices all fade away. There's just the wind, the occasional comment from another visitor, and the vast quiet of altitude. You're suspended in the sky, looking down on the city like a god, seeing it whole, seeing the pattern and the beauty that's invisible from the streets. The Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Met, is one of the world's great repositories of human culture. It contains over 2 million works of art spanning 5,000 years of human history. You could visit every day for years and still not see everything. Entire civilizations are represented here, entire artistic movements, entire centuries compressed into galleries and corridors. But among all the treasures, one of the most remarkable is the Temple of Dender. This is an actual Egyptian temple built around 15 BC, originally located on the banks of the Nile. When the Aswan High Dam was built in the 1960s, the temple would have been submerged under the resulting reservoir. So the Egyptian government dismantled it and gave it to the United States as a gift, and it was reassembled here in the Met. The temple now sits in a massive glass-walled room designed specifically to house it. Before it stretches a reflecting pool, mirroring the temple's columns and walls, evoking the Nile that once flowed beside it. The light coming through the glass creates different moods depending on the time of day. Morning light is clear and bright. Afternoon light is warm and golden. Evening light is soft and diffuse. Sitting by this pool, looking at this ancient temple, you experience a strange temporal displacement. You're in New York in the 21st century, but you're also looking at stones carved 2,000 years ago, touched by ancient hands, inscribed with prayers and dedications to gods no one worships anymore. The temple is utterly serene, utterly silent, a pocket of ancient peace in the modern museum. The Guggenheim Museum is unlike any other museum in the world. Designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, it's a continuous spiral ramp that winds upward from the ground floor to the skylight at the top. The experience of visiting is unique. You take an elevator to the top, then walk slowly down the spiral, viewing art as you descend. The building itself is a work of art, a sculptural form that challenges conventional ideas about what a museum should be. The ramp eliminates the sharp division between galleries, creating instead one long, flowing path. The art hangs on the outer wall, while the inner edge is open to the central atrium, so you can look across the space and see other visitors spiraling down on other levels. Wright intended the museum to be painted red, but he was eventually convinced to use a color he called monumental cream, a warm off-white that glows softly in the light. The building has become iconic, instantly recognizable, one of New York's defining structures. And inside, the experience of moving through space while looking at art creates a meditation on form and function, on how the container shapes the experience of what it contains. At the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, hangs one of the world's most famous paintings, Vincent van Gogh's The Starry Night. The painting is small, smaller than most people expect when they see it in person for the first time, but it radiates intensity. The swirling blues and yellows, the cypress trees reaching like flames toward the turbulent sky, the village sleeping peacefully beneath the cosmic drama above. Visit early in the morning, right when the museum opens, and you might have a few minutes alone with the painting. In the quiet, the swirls seem to move, seem to pulse with the energy Van Gogh poured into them during his time in the asylum at Saint-Rémy. The painting becomes a window into his mind, into his perception of the world as alive and vibrating, every element connected by flowing lines of force. Standing before the starry night in the morning quiet, you can understand why Van Gogh's work has such power. He painted what he felt, not just what he saw. He made the invisible visible, the emotional physical, and the result is a painting that continues to move people over a century after it was created. The Flatiron Building is one of New York's most beloved structures, instantly recognizable by its unique triangular shape. It was designed to fit the narrow lot where Broadway cuts diagonally across Fifth Avenue, creating a wedge-shaped piece of land. The architect embraced the constraint, creating a building that's only 6 feet wide at its narrow point. When it was completed in 1902, it was one of the city's first skyscrapers, and people worried it might fall over. The shape seemed precarious, unstable, but it has stood for over a century, weathering storms and earthquakes, proving that its form, dictated by the lot, is also structurally sound. The Flatiron has become an icon, photographed countless times, used in films and advertisements to represent New York. And there's something about its shape, sharp, definite, unapologetic, that captures something essential about the city's character. New York doesn't apologize for its constraints. It makes art from them. The New York Life Building is topped with a pyramid covered in actual gold leaf, 22-karat gold that catches the light and glows like a warm ember, especially at sunset when the horizontal rays strike it directly. The gold was added in 1928, and it's been maintained ever since, regilded when necessary to keep it brilliant. From certain angles in the city, at certain times of day, this golden pyramid becomes a beacon, a point of warm light among the cooler tones of the surrounding buildings. It's a detail that most people never notice, but once you know about it, you can't help looking for it, can't help tracking its glow across the skyline. Radio City Music Hall is a masterpiece of Art Deco design, and hidden within it is something extraordinary, a massive pipe organ with over 4,000 pipes. This organ, when played, can mimic the sound of an entire orchestra. It was designed to accompany silent films before the advent of talkies, creating musical soundscapes to match the images on screen. The organ is still there, still playable, though it's rarely used in public performances anymore. The pipes range from tiny, less than an inch long, to enormous, over 30 feet tall. Together, they create a range of sounds and timbres that can fill the entire theatre, making the space itself seem to sing. The Woolworth Building, when it opened in 1913, was the world's tallest building, and it was called the Cathedral of Commerce for its Gothic-inspired architecture. The lobby is extraordinary, vaulted ceilings covered in brilliant mosaics, marble walls, bronze details throughout. And hidden in the decoration are whimsical touches. Small stone carvings of the architect, Cass Gilbert, holding a model of the building. A carving of the building's owner, Frank Woolworth, counting nickels and dimes, a reference to his 5 and dime store empire that funded the construction. These details are easy to miss, but they humanize the building, remind you that real people with real personalities created this monument. Every night at 11 o'clock, the lights on the Empire State Building change. The building's tower is illuminated in different colors to commemorate holidays, causes and events. Red, white and blue for patriotic holidays. Pink for breast cancer awareness, rainbow colors for pride, green for St. Patrick's Day. The combinations are endless, and the meaning changes constantly. These light displays have become part of the city's identity. New Yorkers look up to check what colors the Empire State Building is showing, using it as a calendar, a reminder of what's being celebrated or commemorated. The building becomes a giant beacon of awareness, a way for the city to express its values and mark its time. One World Trade Center, the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, stands at exactly 1,776 feet tall. This isn't a coincidence. The height is a deliberate reference to 1786, the year the Declaration of Independence was signed, connecting the building to America's founding ideals of freedom and democracy. The building rises from the site where the Twin Towers stood, where they fell on September 11, 2001. It's a memorial and a declaration, a statement that destruction will be answered with rebuilding, that terror will not win, that New York endures. The elevator ride to the observation deck is itself an experience. Screens show a time-lapse animation of the evolution of the New York skyline from the 1500s, when the island was forested and inhabited by the Lenape, to the present day. You watch 400 years of history compress into 47 seconds, watching the city grow from nothing to everything, from wilderness to the most famous skyline on Earth. The Frick collection is housed in a mansion built by steel magnate Henry Clay Frick in 1914. It's remained largely as he left it, a Gilded Age home filled with extraordinary art. Walking through the Frick is like being a guest in someone's very, very wealthy house, except the paintings on the walls are by Rembrandt and Vermeer and Goya. At the center of the mansion is a garden court, an indoor space with a fountain and plants and natural light filtering through a glass ceiling. This courtyard provides a quiet center to the museum experience. You can sit here, listening to the fountain, surrounded by art and elegance, and feel transported to a different era, a different conception of how wealth and beauty might coexist. The Morgan Library and Museum contains treasures of written culture. 3 original Gutenberg Bibles, some of the first books ever printed with movable type. The personal writing desks of authors like Dickens and Twain. Original manuscripts of musical compositions. Letters written by historical figures. The entire archive of human thought and creativity, preserved its climate-controlled rooms. The library itself is beautiful. 3 levels of books behind bronze and glass, dark wood and rich decoration, light filtering down from above. It's a temple to the written word, a monument to the idea that books matter, that preserving them is essential, that culture is built on this accumulated record of human expression. Rockefeller Center features a sunken plaza that transforms with the seasons. In summer, it's a cafe with outdoor seating, umbrellas providing shade, people eating lunch and people watching. In winter, it becomes the city's most famous ice skating rink, surrounded by the golden statue of Prometheus and overlooked by the massive Christmas tree that becomes the center of the city's holiday celebrations. The plaza is below street level, creating a different perspective on the surrounding buildings. You're looking up at the towers of Rockefeller Center from below, making them seem even taller, even more imposing. And the space creates a pocket of activity separate from the street traffic, a stage where the city performs its seasons. At Rockefeller Center stands Atlas, a massive bronze statue of the Titan holding up the celestial sphere. The statue weighs 7 tons, and Atlas is depicted straining under the weight, muscles tense, face determined. The celestial sphere he carries shows the zodiac, the path of the sun, the tilt of the Earth's axis, all the heavenly mechanics carved into bronze. Atlas has become one of the city's iconic images, frequently photographed, a symbol of strength and endurance. There's something moving about seeing this ancient Greek titan standing in midtown Manhattan, still carrying his burden after all these centuries, still holding up the heavens while the city rushes past. The Chrysler Building is a masterpiece of modernist architecture, designed by Mies van der Rohe and completed in 1958. It's famous for its purity of form, a simple rectangular tower rising from a plaza with no decoration, no ornament, just perfect proportions and beautiful materials. The building used 1,500 tons of bronze in its construction, an extravagant choice that gives the facade a warm, rich color that changes throughout the day as the light shifts. The bronze has weathered over the decades, developing a patina that adds depth and character. The building has become a reference point for architects, a demonstration that simplicity and quality materials can create something timeless. Beneath Grand Central Terminal stretch the North Tunnels, long, quiet marble corridors that connect the main terminal to surrounding buildings and subway lines. These passages are beautiful in their way, with vaulted ceilings and smooth stone walls, but they're utilitarian, functional, designed to move commuters efficiently. Walking these tunnels, especially late at night when they're nearly empty, is an eerie experience. Your footsteps echo. The fluorescent lights hum. The corridors seem to stretch forever, disappearing into perspective. You're in the infrastructure of the city, the hidden circulation system that keeps everything moving, and it's both mundane and strange. Many of New York's older skyscrapers contain hidden emergency staircases, spiraling ornate stairs that were originally designed as elegant exits but are now locked and forgotten. These suicide stairs got their nickname from being uncomfortably steep and narrow, but they're also architectural marvels, beautiful in their engineering. Occasionally during special events or tours, these stairs are open to the public. Climbing them is like traveling through time. The Art Deco details, the original fixtures, the craftsmanship visible in every railing and step. They're monuments to a time when even emergency exits were designed to be beautiful. The Bank of America Tower is one of the world's greenest skyscrapers, featuring innovative environmental systems including an ice battery, tanks that make ice at night when electricity is cheaper, then use that ice to cool the building during the day, reducing energy consumption and load on the power grid. The building also captures rainwater, generates some of its own power, and uses recycled and sustainable materials throughout. It's a demonstration that even in a city built on density and intensity, sustainability is possible, that buildings can be designed to work with natural systems rather than against them. And now as midnight approaches, look up at the skyline. The antennas and crowns of the skyscrapers glow. Red lights on the antennas warning aircraft. Decorative lights on the spires and domes, creating points of beauty in the darkness. These lights act as beacons, guiding the city through the night, creating a constellation of human-made stars. The Empire State Building glows in whatever colors commemorate the day. The Chrysler Building spire catches the light and gleams. One World Trade Center's antenna blinks steadily. All across the city, towers illuminate themselves, creating a skyline, that's as famous at night as during the day, a glowing crown for the city that never sleeps. Let these monuments settle into your mind. The secret spire hoisted in 90 minutes. The Egyptian temple reflected in still water. The spiral ramp of the Guggenheim. The swirling blues of Starry Night. The triangular Flatiron. The golden pyramid glowing at sunset. Atlas straining under his celestial burden. The ice battery cooling the green tower. The lights changing at 11 to mark the day's meaning. This is New York reaching upward, building monuments to human ambition and achievement, creating beauty in steel and stone and glass, filling museums with treasures from every culture and every era, lighting up the night to prove that darkness can be pushed back, that height can be achieved, that the impossible is merely difficult. Rest here among the towers and the art, the lobbies and the galleries, the hidden stairs and the glowing crowns. Let the elevator carry you upward in your imagination. Let the museum's quiet wash over you. Let the skyline at midnight glow in your mind's eye, each building a star in a constellation of human making. There is one more chapter to our journey through this inexhaustible city, one more layer to discover. But for now, stand at the observatory and look out over 5 states. Sit by the Temple of Dender and listen to the silence. Walk the spiral ramp of the Guggenheim. Watch the lights change on the Empire State Building. Be present in this vertical city, this monument to upward striving, this forest of towers reaching toward the sky, while the bedrock holds them steady in the earth below. We descend now from the heights of skyscrapers to the water's edge, from the towers reaching toward heaven to the tunnels burrowing beneath the rivers, from the glowing crown of the city to its pulsing underground heart. This is the final chapter of our New York journey. The harbor lights and subway echoes, the waterfront and the transit veins, the city at its most essential and its most mysterious, preparing to sleep for a few hours before beginning again. Let us ride the ferry across dark water together, descend into the 24-hour subway, walk the winter beach at Coney Island, watch steam rise from the streets and snow silence the noise. Let us discover the city's midnight ritual, the way it winds down without ever fully stopping, the way it breathes in the quiet hours before dawn returns. There's a ferry that crosses New York Harbor, connecting Manhattan to Staten Island, and it runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and it's completely free. No fare, no ticket, just walk on and ride. The Staten Island ferry provides the quietest commute in the city. Once you're away from the docks, the engine noise fades to a low rumble, and you're left with the sound of water against the hull, the cry of gulls, the gentle vibration of the deck beneath your feet. The ferry passes close to the Statue of Liberty, especially on the outbound journey, close enough to see her in detail, to appreciate her scale, to watch her torch glow in the darkness. Late at night, the ferry carries few passengers. You might have an entire outdoor deck to yourself, standing at the railing, watching the city recede as you cross the harbor. The lights of Manhattan reflect on the dark water, creating a second city, an inverted mirror image that ripples and breaks with the waves. The wind is cold, carrying the salt smell of the ocean, reminding you that New York is fundamentally a port city, a place where land meets water, where America greets the world. The subway never stops. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, trains are running somewhere in the system. This is extraordinary. Most cities shut down their transit systems for at least a few hours each night for maintenance and cleaning. But New York can't afford to stop. The city depends too much on its subway, and there are always people who need to get somewhere, no matter what time it is. The system is vast, 472 stations connected by tracks that, if laid end to end, would stretch from New York to Chicago. That's over 800 miles of track, snaking beneath the city and extending into the outer boroughs, carrying millions of people every day through tunnels carved from bedrock and river silt. Late at night, the subway becomes different. The crowds thin. The trains run less frequently. The stations echo with emptiness. If you ride the subway at 3 in the morning, you might be alone in your car. The lights flickering, the train swaying on the tracks, the darkness of the tunnels pressing against the windows. It's both eerie and comforting, this late-night subway. Eerie because it's so empty, so different from the daytime crush. Comforting because it's still running, still reliable, still carrying you home no matter how late you stayed out. The city doesn't abandon you. The infrastructure persists. Hidden in the subway system is a ghost station. City Hall Station was the original terminal of the first subway line, opened in 1904. It was designed to be beautiful, vaulted tile ceilings, elegant arches, brass chandeliers, skylights that would let natural light filter down from the street above. It was meant to be a showpiece, proof that the subway could be not just functional, but grand. But the station's curved platform couldn't accommodate the longer trains that were eventually introduced, and in 1945, it was closed. Now it sits abandoned, perfectly preserved, a time capsule of early 20th century optimism and craftsmanship. Occasionally, the Transit Authority offers tours, allowing people to descend into this beautiful, forgotten space and see what the subway aspired to be. At Hudson Yards rises a structure unlike anything else in the city. The vessel is a massive spiral staircase, 154 interconnecting flights of stairs rising 16 stories, creating a honeycomb of copper-colored steel that seems to float above the plaza. You can climb it, ascending and descending, crossing paths with other climbers, seeing the city from constantly changing angles. The vessel is controversial. Some love it, some think it's a wasteful folly. But there's no denying its visual impact, especially when the setting sun catches the copper finish and the entire structure glows like it's been forged in fire. It's a monument to climbing for its own sake, to the journey rather than the destination, to the idea that going up and down can be its own reward. From the Brooklyn Heights Promenade, you can see one of the world's most famous views, the Manhattan skyline across the East River. This promenade is a pedestrian walkway built in the 1950s, cantilevered over the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, creating a quiet observation deck with unobstructed views of lower Manhattan. Stand here in the evening and you watch the city transform as the lights come on. Office buildings glow from within. The bridges illuminate. The towers compete for attention in a vertical display of light and shadow. The whole skyline becomes a field of fallen stars, a constellation brought down to Earth, still burning, still brilliant. The view changes with the weather, with the seasons, with the time of day. Morning fog obscures the buildings, then gradually reveals them as the sun burns through. Sunset turns the glass towers into mirrors of gold and orange. Night creates silhouettes, the buildings becoming geometric shapes defined by their lighted windows. And snow. Snow turns everything soft and quiet, muffling sound, blurring edges, making the city look like a dream. Coney Island in summer is noise and color, the screams from the roller coasters, the barkers calling out from game booths, the music from the boardwalk, the smell of hot dogs and cotton candy, the crowds pressing together on the beach and the streets. It's sensory overload, carnival chaos, the city's ID given a seaside playground. But visit Coney Island in winter and you find something else entirely. The amusement parks are closed. The rides stand motionless, their steel skeletons exposed, stripped of their bright paint and festive banners. The boardwalk is nearly empty. The beach stretches wide and clean, the waves rolling in to meet sand unmarked by footprints. There's a haunting beauty to winter Coney Island. The silence feels profound after summer's noise. The architecture of the rides, the curves of the cyclone roller coaster, the tower of the parachute, jump, reveals itself as sculpture, form divorced from function. You can walk for miles and see no one, hear nothing but wind and waves and the occasional cry of a gull. The city has receded, and you're left with something elemental, sand and water and sky, the beach that existed before Coney Island became Coney Island, that will exist after the rides have rusted away. The L train connects Manhattan and Brooklyn via a tunnel beneath the East River. Riding this tunnel, if you pay attention, you can hear something remarkable, a deep hum, a vibration that seems to come from the earth itself. This is the sound of the city above you, transmitted through the riverbed, through the bedrock, through the steel and concrete of the tunnel. The city's pulse made audible. It's a reminder that the subway exists in the same physical space as the city above, that the weight of millions of tons of buildings presses down, that rivers flow overhead, that you're traveling through the actual geology of the region, not some separate realm. The tunnel connects you to the city in a visceral way, makes you feel the infrastructure, the engineering, the audacity of tunneling beneath a major river to connect two pieces of an island city. South Street Seaport preserves a piece of New York's maritime past. Cobblestone streets, low buildings from the 19th century, and historic ships tied to the piers, tall ships with wooden hulls and intricate rigging, creaking gently against their moorings as the tide shifts. Walking through the seaport, especially in the early morning before the tourists arrive, you can almost imagine the city as it was 200 years ago, when these docks were the center of commerce, when clipper ships brought goods from around the world, when New York's fortune was built on maritime trade. The ships smell of tar and old wood. The rigging makes soft clicking sounds as it moves in the wind, and the water laps against the hulls. The same water that's been lapping there for centuries. At Pier 55 sits one of the city's newest parks, Little Island, a floating park built on 132 tulip-shaped concrete pots rising from the Hudson River. The park seems to hover above the water, a green space lifted into the air, with hills and pathways and viewing platforms, all supported by these sculptural concrete stems. Walking through Little Island is a surreal experience. You're on solid ground, but you can see water through gaps in the structure, reminding you that you're suspended above the river. The park creates microclimates. The hills block wind in some areas, concentrate it in others. Plants grow that wouldn't normally survive in this urban environment because the park's design creates protected pockets. From certain angles, the concrete supports look organic, like stems or bones, natural forms despite being entirely artificial. It's a park that challenges your perception of what's possible, that demonstrates New York's continuing ability to create the unprecedented, to build things that have never existed before. Flushing, Queens contains the largest Chinatown in New York City, larger than the famous Chinatown in Manhattan. The markets here are vast, sprawling, filled with foods and goods you won't find elsewhere in the city. Early in the morning, these markets hum with quiet energy, vendors arranging displays, shoppers selecting vegetables and fish, transactions conducted in Mandarin and Cantonese, the smell of ginger and star anise and fresh seafood filling the air. Walking through Flushing's markets feels like being transported to another country. The signs are in Chinese characters. The products are imported from Asia. The rhythms of commerce follow patterns established over centuries in distant cities. And yet you're in New York, in Queens, proof that the city contains multitudes, that it's not one place but hundreds of places overlapping, each with its own language and customs and internal logic. The Manhattan Bridge, painted its distinctive blue, creates a specific sound when trains cross it, a rhythmic thrumming as the wheels hit the joints in the steel track. This sound is unique to this bridge, a mechanical heartbeat that nearby residents can hear from their apartments, that pedestrians crossing the bridge feel in their bones. The bridge also creates a famous photographic composition. From certain streets in Dumbo, down under the Manhattan Bridge overpass, you can frame the Empire State Building perfectly through the bridge's arch. The shot has become iconic, reproduced thousands of times, but it never gets old. The bridge in the foreground, massive and blue, the Empire State Building in the distance, small but recognizable, the whole composition creating a sense of depth and scale. Brooklyn Grange operates the world's largest rooftop soil farm. On top of buildings in Brooklyn and Queens, they've built actual farms. Tons of soil spread across reinforced roofs, vegetables growing in neat rows, bees pollinating in rooftop hives. The farms are productive, selling thousands of pounds of produce to local restaurants and farmers markets. But they're also surreal. You climb stairs expecting a typical New York rooftop, tar paper, gravel, maybe some HVAC equipment. Instead, you emerge into a farm, tomatoes ripening in the sun, lettuce in neat rows, the smell of earth and growing things, and 10 stories below, traffic flows, honking and rushing, completely unaware of the agriculture happening above their heads. The farms demonstrate that even in the densest urban environment on Earth, there's room for growing food, for creating green space, for agriculture. They're proof that cities don't have to be the opposite of nature, that with creativity and commitment, the urban and the agricultural can coexist. In the Bronx, the New York Botanical Garden contains something extraordinary, a 50-acre forest that has never been logged. This is old-growth forest, the same forest that covered the island when the Lenape lived here, before the Dutch arrived, before New York existed. Trees that are centuries old, growing in the same patterns as their ancestors, maintaining an ecosystem that predates the city by thousands of years. Walking through this forest, you're walking through deep time. These trees remember when Manhattan was Mannahatta. Their roots reach into soil that has never been plowed. The understory plants are native species, growing without human intervention. It's a window into the past, a glimpse of what all of New York once looked like before it became New York. The Pepsi Cola sign in Long Island City is a protected landmark, its red neon glow reflecting on the East River since 1936. It's advertising, certainly, but it's also become part of the city's identity, part of the visual landscape that defines this stretch of waterfront. At night, the sign glows brilliant red, visible from Manhattan, from the bridges, from the water. It's been there so long that multiple generations have grown up seeing it, have used it as a landmark for giving directions, have associated its glow with home. It's advertising that's transcended its commercial purpose to become something else. A beacon, a piece of shared visual culture, a constant in a constantly changing city. At Astor Place stands a large black cube sculpture called the Alamo. It's 9 feet tall, made of steel, mounted on a point so that it can rotate. And here's the remarkable thing. Despite weighing several tons, the cube is so perfectly balanced that a single person can spin it if they push hard enough. The cube has become interactive public art. People push it, spin it, photograph themselves with it. It gets covered in graffiti, which is periodically cleaned off, then covered again. It's been there since 1967, and in that time it's become part of the neighborhood, a meeting point, a piece of the city that people have a relationship with that responds to human touch. Every night, in the quietest hours before dawn, volunteers conduct what's called the Midnight Run. They load vans with food, blankets, clothing, and hygiene supplies, and they drive to locations throughout the city where homeless people sleep. They distribute what they've brought, offering not just material aid, but human contact, recognition, respect. The Midnight Run is New York at its most compassionate. The city that can seem harsh and indifferent also contains people who care enough to spend their nights helping those most vulnerable. The volunteers don't solve homelessness. The problems are too large, too systemic for individual charity to fix, but they provide immediate help, warmth on cold nights, food for the hungry, the message that someone cares. New York has the largest steam system in the world. Beneath the streets runs a network of pipes carrying steam generated at central plants, used to heat buildings throughout Manhattan. The white plumes you see rising from street grates are this steam, pure water vapor escaping from the system. These plumes are iconic. They appear in countless photographs and films, creating atmosphere, adding visual interest to street scenes. In winter, they're especially dramatic, the hot steam meeting cold air, creating massive clouds that billow up between buildings, temporarily obscuring traffic, creating moments of mystery in the everyday landscape. The steam system is old, dating back to the 1880s in some areas. The pipes occasionally rupture, sending geysers of steam shooting into the air, forcing evacuations of entire blocks. But most of the time, they work quietly, invisibly heating millions of square feet of space, another piece of infrastructure that makes the dense city possible. The Queensboro Bridge, also known as the 59th Street Bridge, inspired Simon and Garfunkel's song, the 59th Street Bridge Song, Feelin' Groovy. The bridge itself is massive, complex, a cantilever design that seems impossibly intricate, like a giant piece of metalwork jewelry spanning the East River. Walking or driving across the Queensboro, you experience the city from a unique perspective. The bridge is lower than some of the others, so you're closer to the water, closer to the buildings, you can see into apartments, see the life of the city at eye level. And the structure of the bridge creates a rhythmic experience, passing through the vertical supports, light and shadow alternating, creating a strobe effect that's almost hypnotic. At 3 in the morning, while most of the city sleeps, the Fulton Fish Market in the Bronx comes alive. This is when the catch arrives, when the wholesalers gather, when the serious business of distributing seafood throughout the region begins. The market fills with ice and silver scales, with the smell of the ocean, with the shouts of auctioneers and the calculated movements of buyers. This has been happening for over 180 years. The market has moved locations. It used to be at the South Street Seaport, but the ritual persists. The city must be fed, and feeding it begins in the middle of the night in refrigerated warehouses with men who know how to judge the quality of fish by sight and touch, who understand the economics of perishable goods, who connect the ocean to the restaurant plate. New York has many silences, but the most profound comes during a heavy snowfall. Snow is a natural acoustic dampener, absorbing sound, muffling everything. During a serious snowstorm, Manhattan transforms into a silent movie. You can see the traffic moving, see people walking, but the sounds are muted, softened, turned down like someone's adjusted the city's volume. Walking through Manhattan during a heavy snow is magical. The streets empty as people shelter indoors. The cars slow to a crawl. The normal soundtrack of sirens and horns and construction fades away. You hear the snow itself, a soft hiss as it falls, and occasional plop when accumulated snow slides off a building or tree. And beneath it all, a silence so deep and unusual for this city that it feels holy, as if the urban world has paused to allow contemplation. The snow covers everything in white, softening the hard edges of the city, turning the geometric into the organic, transforming New York into something gentle and quiet and temporary. Within hours, the plows will come, the salt will spread, the snow will turn to slush and then disappear down drains. But for a few hours, the city exists in this state of grace, blanketed and hushed. One World Trade Center, standing at 1,576 feet, is so tall that at dawn it acts like a giant sundial. When the first light of the rising sun strikes its peak, it casts a shadow that stretches for miles across New York Harbor, across the water, pointing west like an enormous finger. This shadow moves as the sun rises, sweeping across the city like the hand of a clock, marking the passage of time on a massive scale. It's a daily phenomenon, mostly unnoticed, but spectacular when you're aware of it, when you watch this tower of glass and steel become an instrument for measuring the sun's movement across the sky, and finally, when the sun fully rises over the Atlantic, when the dawn light spreads across the harbor and touches the towers of Manhattan, when it illuminates the parks and bridges and waterways, the city begins again. The island of many hills, now an island of millions of people, starts its million-footed march into another day of history. The ferry returns to its dock. The subway continues its endless circulation. The steam rises from the streets. The markets open. The coffee shops unlock their doors. The first joggers enter Central Park. The construction sites roar to life. And New York, having rested as much as it ever rests, having quieted as much as it ever quiets, resumes its essential character. Loud, ambitious, relentless, exhausting, exhilarating, impossible, inevitable. Here on Sleepy City Traveler, We have walked together from the bedrock foundation to the harbor's edge, from the hills of the Lenape to the skyscrapers of the present, from Central Park's deliberate wilderness to the subway's underground arteries, from the museums holding humanity's treasures to the waterfront where the city meets the sea. We've discovered the $24 purchase and the 7-spiked crown, the backward zodiac and the whispering gallery, the temple reflected in still water and the spiral ramp of art, the cherry blossoms and the medieval stones, the secret spire and the golden pyramid, the free ferry and the ghost station, the rooftop farm and the old-growth forest, the midnight run and the snow-silenced streets. Thank you for walking these miles with me, for riding these trains and ferries, for climbing to observatories and descending to tunnels, for standing at the harbor's edge while the city glows behind you. Thank you for seeing New York just as buildings and crowds, but as layers of history and humanity, as stone and water and green-growing things, as the accumulated efforts of millions of people across 4 centuries, all trying to build something unprecedented, something that shouldn't work but does. May you sleep as deeply as New York sleeps in those few quiet hours before dawn. May you dream of copper crowns and limestone lions, of bridges tested by elephants and buildings pierced by lightning, of gardens floating on the Hudson and forests preserved in the Bronx. May you wake with the memory of this journey still bright in your heart, carrying with you some small piece of New York's relentless energy, its impossible optimism, its bedrock certainty that tomorrow will be built today, that the city will endure, that the march into history continues. Good night, traveler. Good night, New York. Good night, island of many hills, city of immigrants and dreamers, of stone and steel and glass, of parks and museums and subway echoes, of harbor lights and morning shadows. Sleep well in your few hours of relative quiet. Dream well beneath your forest of towers. And when the sun rises over the Atlantic and touches your western shore, begin again your beautiful, exhausting, eternal dance. The ferry is docked, the trains are running, the city awaits, and somewhere in the darkness before dawn, on the 86th floor of the Empire State Building, the lights change color to mark another day in the endless calendar of this impossible, magnificent city. Oyasumi Nasai, New York. Buonanotte, Manhattan. Rest well. Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island. The bedrock will hold you steady through the night, and morning, as always, will come too soon, bringing with it another day of noise and ambition, another day of quiet pockets and green sanctuaries, another day of being New York, loud, soft, hard, gentle, eternal, ever-changing, impossible, and absolutely, undeniably real. The city that never sleeps is sleeping now, as much as it ever sleeps, and so should you. Good night.